Alright, so we've reached Friday in our Wes Craven week, which means we're almost at the end. And forgive me if I seem kind of over dramatic about this, but it's with a pretty heavy heart we're talking about My Soul to Take, because we talked about Deadly Friend, and we talked about how even with great directors, it's very rare for a director to have a spotless filmography, and we talked about how Deadly Friend didn't feel very successful to me in regards to all it was trying to do. And then cut to many years later, and My Soul to Take comes out in 2010, and it's basically one of, if not like his worst reviewed movie. So, I would love to come in here after all the thrashing that this movie took. I would love to do this video and come in with like the hot take and say that it's misunderstood and it's like a satire that went over people's heads and stuff like that, and talk about all the reasons that it should have a resurgence and should be seen as this, forgotten masterpiece or whatever. I really, really wish I could be that person, but you'll have noticed when we did these throughout this week that I said I wasn't doing them in order of release, and really the main reason, pretty much the only reason I didn't do the movies in order this week is because I didn't want to end on this. I didn't want to go out on the note of My Soul to Take and how I feel about it. So that's basically where we are. But the thing about it is, when you talk about movies that you really, really dislike, you tend to... you get mad at those. Like, when a movie's just really, really bad, you get this feeling that you get mad at it because of how bad that it is. And that's the way that I felt when I came out of the theater in 2010, in October 2010 when this came out. But as time has gone on, it's less... I don't feel mad at this movie at all, interestingly enough. I just feel, like, confused and baffled by it, especially when you look at it in the context of the rest of his filmography, because something that can be really fun to do with directors is when you watch like all their movies and you kind of see like different through lines and stuff like that and different trademarks that kind of sneak their way in. Even movies that feel the most out of place will suddenly kind of make sense in the context. We talked about this recently with Karin Kusama, where all of her movies seem so different and so like out of left field, but if you watch them like together, you'll see like patterns, regardless of what the movies are. And I thought maybe My Soul to Take would finally make sense if I did something like that. So I watched My Soul to Take, like, right in line with most of his other movies, the movies we're talking about this week especially, and instead of it becoming clearer what My Soul to Take was going to be, I'm actually only even more baffled and confused by where this movie's coming from. And the thing about it is, like, I really didn't want to even talk about it, because, like I said, I want to, do nothing but praise Craven because of everything he did for this genre, and just the legend that he is, and just, by all accounts, what, like, a good person he was. So I feel like absolute shit just coming here and thrashing a movie, but even more so, because we talked about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and how that movie turned out so terribly, and when you go back you realize that he didn't make it the way he wanted to, he basically disowned it, the studio was forcing him, all that stuff. So, you go to this movie and you think like, oh, well, something must have happened, the studio must have happened or something. But, interestingly enough, apparently Craven was quoted as saying that he was very proud of this movie, and it, like, genuinely hurt him, the reception that it got. So, for that, plus so many reasons, I just didn't even want to talk about this, or go into it, but it's like, I didn't want to skip it, either, because, like, we're doing a whole week devoted here, and the fact that he wrote it especially, like, when I was choosing the 7 for this week, I wanted to include all the ones that are written by him also, like, exclusively written by him, with the credit written and directed by Wes Craven. And of course, this was the last one to have that credit. So I didn't want to, but at the same time, I feel like maybe we can... There are certain things in here where it's like, maybe we can see what he was going for, or maybe moments that actually do come through, and, like, make sense, and maybe give us a view of what this movie could have been. But at the same time, I am really having to struggle to condense what I'm going to say, because I genuinely feel like it's one of those movies that we could go moment by moment, scene by scene, and, like, see how almost every detail feels wrong and off. And but I mean, as far as him having written it, the one thing I can say right away before anything else is the great thing about the movies that he wrote are there's always going to be an originality to them, and this is not excluded from that. This, if anything, this movie does have a very sort of original concept, and something that feels very fresh in, like, the horror genre, something it feels like we hadn't quite seen before, and especially through his vision. So and that, maybe that potential is what makes it even worse. But but there's definitely, you can get the sense there was something in here, and you do get the sense when you look really deep and through the cracks, which is what we're going to try to do now, to see the movie that he was proud of. So that's what I want to try to do here without being too insulting to the legend. So let's give this a try. So this opening scene alone sets off a lot of red flags already. It just feels so incredibly sloppy in a way. It feels like Craven never was. There's like when you just listen to, like, the audio and you see the visual, just there's like a post-production sort of thing that seems like it went totally off. Like, there was like half of this opening scene was done after it was filmed, and the audio, like, barely matches up, and it's like things were being added in at the last minute, like something went horribly wrong during filming or something. It feels like a straight-to-DVD director got a hold of it, with, like, those moments of slow-mo and, like, the flashy cuts and stuff like that. Stuff that just doesn't feel like him at all. I don't know where any of this comes from. There's the really almost laughable exposition coming from, like, the news, and then the wife basically repeating the news in really clumsy, unnatural dialogue. The wife's acting in general feels, like, really stilted and weird and, like, alien, which is something that's continuous throughout this movie. I don't know where the hell really any of the performances in this movie come from, but it doesn't feel like it's of this planet. None of this, by the way, feels like it's unintentional. Like, there are some things in this opening scene that I will highlight that do kind of shine a light on what this could have been, or what the movie's tone could have been. But I don't really see it here. Like the mirror jump scare, where you kind of expect when somebody looks in the mirror that close a mirror and there's going to be something there that jump scares them. And they kind of fake it out by having the wife come up behind him with her weird exposition. And it's you get the sense of, like, okay, is it self-awareness? Is this what we're going to do? Because obviously, you know, Craven's done self-awareness, like, throughout his career, so that would make perfect sense. But then as it goes on, it just feels like it takes itself so seriously, and you can't really see any of those moments. Like, it's like, I've maybe once heard the argument that the movie is satire in some way, or some attack on critics or something, but it's like, it's that thing of, there's the idea of doing satire by just doing the thing, with the line being really blurry, and the more the line is blurred, the more effective the satire is when you can't tell. But I don't really see any particular thing it's satirizing, because it feels very straightforward about what it's about, or what it's trying to be about. And like I said, when you see the moments that are there that do feel self-aware and do feel like it's his cleverness towards the genre coming out, that comes from a vast knowledge of the genre and experience in the genre, you can see the difference between, well, that doesn't really mesh with this. Like, there are moments here that feel very intentional, like when Frank Grillo's partner is reaching out for his jacket, and we think that because, the killer's on the stretcher there's going to be a jump moment when she reaches. And then the jump moment comes right after that, when she's done that, and then she reaches for something else. And it's like, that feels very sort of aware, and like they're playing with tropes and playing with cliches and all that, and the audience's expectations and stuff like that. I also like that this movie opens with the unkillable killer cliche, because usually the climax of every horror movie or slasher movie is you think the killer's dead and then the killer keeps coming back, and it's like, to make that the opening scene also feels like this very intentional sort of, flipping the genre on its head sort of thing, and expectations and stuff like that. So yeah, and just kind of the general chaos of this opening, as sloppy as it feels, I feel like on paper it probably looked really, like in the script it probably looked pretty good, but the way it translates to the screen and the editing and all that other stuff, it feels like an absolute disaster. And like I said, like a straight-to-DVD director somehow got a hold of it. Like a straight-to-DVD director whose main inspiration was Craven made this movie, where you can get like little tiny hints of Craven, but it looks like somebody else entirely who has no idea what the fuck they're doing. There's also an early scene here that feels clever in the sense of when Jay is killed on the bridge. He's like the first main character to die in like the main story once we've gotten past the prologue. And because it feels so early in the story, and because we've set up this is just a group of kids, and a lot of them feel very jokey and like maybe prone to pranks or something, this is an interesting scene where Jay is killed on the bridge, because it happens so abruptly that it really feels like it's setting itself up as one of those scenes that we see in every fucking horror movie where somebody thinks we think somebody's about to be killed by the killer, and then it's a prank, and it's somebody in a costume, and then everything dies down, and then we get another scene and the person is killed for real. That's what the trope is, and what everybody knows, and what it looks like this scene is setting up as. So the fact that there's no prank going on here, and it's just literally the kill happens that abruptly, also feels intentional in, oh, I know what the audience is expecting, so I'm going to toy with that a little bit and hit them early. So that, like I said, with that kind of stuff, you can see where the real Craven is in here, absolutely. And so it makes everything else around it all the more, what the fuck? So now I think we can talk about what's probably one of the most egregious weaknesses of this movie, and that is the main character, Bug. Yeah, the main character is a pretty big weakness to have when this character is so fucking weird. Because, well, here's the thing. So the thing about this character is he is 16. They're in high school, and everybody around, like everybody in this group, these 7, are obviously all connected in a way, and that seems to potentially be driving some of the actions and decisions made by these characters and how they interact with each other, is this connection that they have of the being all born on the same day, and they all might be the souls of, the original killer and stuff like that. But, once again, a very cool and original concept we started with. But then we meet Bug. And just so much goes out the window because of how weird and childlike this character is, for seemingly no reason, that everybody else is just kind of... You can't really tell if everybody else is kind of playing along with this character, because the characters don't even seem to be aware that there's something really off, where he's like, his aunt, who's like basically his mom, basically talks to him and treats him like he's 5. He talks and acts like he's 10, yet he's this 16-year-old high schooler, made even weirder by the fact that there's the moment in the bathroom where his sister and Brittany are talking, and they say how girls find him attractive. Like, he's this sort of desirable and popular kid. I don't... That whole thing is confusing in general, but the way also that when they set up at the beginning, when they're by the lake and we set up the whole story, and Jay's having that moment that really opens up to where it's like, oh, this movie could be really cool because we're still in the early stages of it. when they're talking about the origin story of the killer, and then Jay said, well, in my version, he's this. And so that kind of sets up that, like, everybody in town kind of has their own version of the legend, which is another thing that's really cool about this setup. But then, Bug basically being a fucking child, like a 10-year-old in a 16-year-old's body, is... the way he approaches this basically detours the whole conversation and detours that whole idea in general. Because he's starting to tell the story, and Denzel Whitaker is chiming in also, and they're talking about, how he can... in Jay's version of the story, he, like, broke into a house and he took clothes and stuff like that. And Denzel Whitaker makes a response and says, like, yeah, he took the clothes. If he were still alive, is what he says. If he were still alive. So Bug hears this and says, wait, the Ripper's still alive? And you would say, no, you fucking moron. He said, if the killer were still alive. But instead of correcting him, Jay just completely detours, and Denzel Whitaker completely detours, and they go on, well, they never found the body, and here's all the stuff about, oh, he's probably still alive. One part I even forgot to mention, when Alex is trying to convince him to say, it felt fucking great, and his response is, that's a bad word. So what you're probably thinking is, this is the way they play up that he's innocent, because it's a whole thematic thing, that he's this innocent character. And that's the way the town treats him, and that's what's driven his sister to be the school bully, which we'll get into. But it doesn't make him seem innocent, it just makes him weird. And just like he has no idea how to function in normal life, and nobody seems, like I said, nobody seems to treat him, like, differently than he would, like Alex, for instance. Like, Alex is supposed to be his best friend, and even though nothing's ever really drawn to this, Alex seems more like his handler, I guess. Like, they say he treats him like his monkey when they're talking in the bathroom, but that's... So it's like they're really going around the fact that Bug seems like he's not even of this world. Like, he has no idea how to interact with other humans. None of it feels natural, none of it feels like a real person. And I don't know... And maybe the point is that none of these people feel like real people. They all feel like types. Like, maybe it was Craven getting to Cabin in the Woods before Cabin in the Woods. It does not give off that vibe because you can see the little hints of... the Craven that we know and love, the self-aware Craven, the Craven that's, playing with the audience. And, like I said, that feels so incredibly different from what the rest of this movie is. So another character that's just totally confusing is Brittany, where she looks innocent, and the interesting thing about her is that on the surface she looks like, she could be a love interest, or like in maybe a final girl in kind of another story. But at the same time, she seems to be taking her job in the Fang's sort of bullying department pretty seriously, where there's the scene where she calls up Brandon and she says, I have your assignment, and she's like very serious and stern with him of how hard Alex and Bug should be hit, and the way that she's just kind of this crony for Fang, and it also feels like a character going through a total identity crisis, because it feels like they're kind of trying to build her up that she might be like a Veronica amidst the Heathers, maybe, but I don't, because it goes back and forth, because she's very devoted to Fang and Fang's bullying for some reason, but then there's also this whole thing of when she seems rather repulsed by Bug, but then sometimes not. I don't know, because, there's the moment when she seems very down to business about, Bug being bullied by Brandon for, Fang's sake. So, then there's the moment where they talk about this letter to Bug that she wants to open, and when Brittany sees it, she says, like, but this is to Bug. It's like she thinks it's wrong. So I don't. There's that, but then there's this moment where she has every reason to continue to be repulsed by Bug. So she goes into the bathroom. He's sitting there in the girls' bathroom with her purse. Her stuff is all over the place, and this is obviously going to be. This might even be a traumatizing moment. So later on, he's sitting outside, and she walks by him, and she says, "Pervert," and it's like, yeah. If I were Brittany, that's probably what I would say, too. That's how I would react to him also. And then she immediately turns around and says, "I'm sorry I screamed." This guy, who was going through your purse, had stuff all over the place, was hiding out in the girls' bathroom when you went in there. You're sorry? And so I don't... okay, so maybe the thing they're going for is... She's devoted to Fang because of cliques and peer pressure, but she actually likes Bug. Well, number one, like we talked about before, why the fuck does she like Bug? Why would anybody like Bug? He's a fucking weirdo. He acts like he's fucking 10 years old. But okay, let's say that she has that attraction or whatever, but because there's also the thing of, oh, well, she told, Brandon to give him like a 3 or something. But she was also like really... She had him be brutal to Alex, so whatever Brittany's deal is another thing that just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense or add up in any way whatsoever. But I guess another interesting thing about Brittany is that the way that she dies halfway through the movie, where I talked about it, it is interesting that they set her up in a number of ways where, like, she could be the part of the bullying crowd that has a redemption arc. She could be the love interest. Like I said, in another story, she could even conceivably be a final girl. So to just kind of unceremoniously kill her halfway through is interesting, but we're also killing off like nearly every character like all at once in this sort of middle bit here, where Penelope and Brandon and Brittany like kind of all die at once, and that's It just feels really weird and sloppy, but like I said, there was something interesting in there, and something in there that was playing with expectations, but... Also talking about the whole Fang thing, of her being like this bully that seemingly controls everybody, and it's like, I feel like in any school in this world, Fang would be a character that's like really cringy and seen as a total loser. Like, she's 19 and she's still in high school. And it's like, maybe the approach is, oh, she's the older girl, so they follow her, but I don't know, I feel like I said, everybody in this movie is a fucking alien anyway. And just to go into the other characters real quick, Penelope's another character that just feels really weird, because it's like, is she supposed to be creepy? Is she supposed to be helpful? Is she supposed to be nice? Is she supposed to be a suspect? That, once again, it sounds more interesting when you just say it. But when you actually see it, it's like, the character just feels so unnatural and weird, and I don't know. There's definitely a likability to Xenogra. I remember growing up and seeing her in, like, Snow Day and Max Heel's Big Move and stuff like that. But I don't know what the hell this character is, but she was giving it everything she had. As I'm sure, as hard as it is to believe, many people in the young cast here were, because they were a young cast in a Wes Craven movie. That must have been insanely exciting, but so I don't know how these performances happened. The only way I can think of is if, for some reason, they were done intentionally, and every actor in this movie is just playing an alien, and and that's the secret to this movie. I don't know. We talked about Denzel Whitaker. Jerome, I think his character's name is, who is blind, seemingly for only to cut down on like the number of characters, because there were 7 main characters. And it's like, well, that's an awful lot to work with and cram into this, and we don't want the movie to be too long, so let's kill Jay right away, and then let's make Jerome blind so that we can kind of... There's not much to do with him in regards to the rest of the characters in this storyline, and it's like, they say in the movie, well, he can't be a suspect either because he's blind, so it almost feels like a way of writing him out, I guess, so, but to still keep 7 characters. And then there's Brandon, who is obviously as repulsive as possible and as hateable as possible. I guess the creative thing they did with Brandon that's interesting is the fact that even though Fang is a very lame character and very cringy character, it is interesting to have Brandon be like the typical sort of varsity jacket bully, but he's like just a henchman to somebody else is kind of interesting idea, but like I said, interesting ideas in this movie are they're present, but they're never expanded upon. Now, as far as the Ripper himself, itself, whatever, whenever we see him, um, I think they were clearly going for this idea that the Ripper has a lot of anger in him, and that's something that can make him really scary. Is like he's not just this character that's like, oh, he has a particular motive or something like that. It's just like he's like anger and havoc and murder personified is basically what he is, which once again is a cool idea, but like I said, it feels like a teenager trying to be edgy wrote his dialogue, like when he stabs Brandon and says, "Does anybody want to say goodbye to?" And in this very weird and out of character moment, I suppose because he's in death, Brandon says, "My unborn child," and the Ripper says, "Fuck your fucking unborn child." It's an interesting, unexpected moment, but like I said, also feels like the Ripper was written by an angry teenager as opposed to being this angry undead force. They gave him that very silly voice, which maybe they were trying to recreate the magic that was Roger Jackson's voice in the Scream movies, but said it's just I don't know if it's just the voice that's silly or if it's the dialogue they have to say or what, but just the Ripper's another character that's just not particularly scary. The one thing that the Ripper says that is kind of interesting, only because there's a visual to go with it, is when he's chasing Bug around the house and he says, "Where are your wings, angel?" or something like that. Because Bug's losing his innocence or something. There's a very cool way they represent that, but maybe it's a little on the nose, but it's actually pretty cool. How after this scuffle, Bug has two cuts on his back that look like wings have been cut off, and I feel like that's pretty cool. That's a good image and a good way to kind of show visually the transformation the character's going through. Which is nice because you're like, yes, please put this innocence thing to bed because that's just making the character really fucking off. So then we get to our rather disjointed ending here where kind of all starts to get revealed and there's this weird scene where Fang just starts beating the shit out of Bug with stock punching sounds and stuff like that, and it's like what could have basically been just, a shouting match or this emotional moment. And it's like you can see where there was probably a good performance to be had here, where we see this other side of Fang. We see like the sister come out, and we see what her. Interestingly enough, very similar to Emma Roberts' big monologue at the end of Scream 4, which would have been Craven's next and last movie the next year, months later actually, and that. It all just kind of feels like it's trying to wrap up. It feels like it takes forever, but at the same time is wrapping up very abruptly. And so there's nothing really satisfying about any of the payoffs here. There's nothing satisfying about Fang's sort of redemption arc. There's nothing satisfying about the payoff that we've been setting up with Alex's stepfather, where like he kills him off screen and says, "Oh, I killed him." And it's like, once again, I can see where there's a good technique here, character-wise, because Alex goes on this tirade of, I'm so sick of the killing, I'm so sick of people killing each other. So, in that regard, I do think it's an interesting choice to have the murder that Alex commits be off-screen. But still, like, it feels like such a weak payoff because the way we built up to that. Like, it felt like we saw the whole interactions with the stepfather to get the satisfaction of whatever the payoff to that was going to be, of him getting some sort of come up and sort like what we talked about with Deadly Friend, where I felt like Christy Swanson killing her dad didn't feel like much of a payoff. It felt very like cutting us short on the satisfaction of what it was setting up that whole time. And then we get to this point where the climax gets us to a point where he's going to have to kill Alex in order to beat it, I guess. Like I said, with the whole soul jumping thing, it's hard to really. We kind of talked about this with Shocker, where it's like, much as I love the ending of Shocker, it's like I don't. It doesn't feel a lot like closure, though. I can't tell for sure, and it doesn't really tell us whether or not like how things are done. Like, are things done, or have we temporarily just put them off, or what has happened here? I don't know, but there is something profound about him having to kill his best friend and basically put everything on him, and it seems like a reach. The last part of narration when he says, "This is Alex wouldn't have it any other way." I guess they establish enough throughout the movie that I can buy that. Like, if Alex was completely, he was a little bit, but if Alex was completely aware of what was going on, Alex would have said, "Kill me and put it on me. That's the only way to stop this." Or to get the town, calm again. Or whatever. But, like I said, it's all in the execution, and the execution just is not here. So, it's a movie that's just all over the damn place. I don't know if it's, like, cut up or not. Like I said, I feel like it can't be too altered from Craven's original vision if he said that he was proud of it. So, this is the movie, I think. So, I don't know, but talking about, like, the atmosphere that it brings, I love the idea of the concept starting at what is essentially a ghost story, where it's like we have the candles on the ambulance, which is like this sort of, almost like the campfire story feeling is what it gives it. Like the setting of the bridge, which feels much more significant in the beginning than it is for the rest of the movie. I think after Jay is killed, we never talk about or see the bridge again. But it's a very atmospheric looking bridge, so that's nice for as long as it lasts. I like the idea of it feeling like it's in the fall. Like, there's the scene where Bug and Alex are walking through the woods, and, it's like all the leaves are down and they're orange, and you hear the crunching under their feet. And it's like the fall vibe is kind of this is the best vibe to have with a horror movie, and that's great. Mind you, it's completely done in by the very next scene where we see Penelope walking to school through a completely green woods, but, whatever. And stuff like, visuals like like the bloody Penelope in the bathroom mirror, giving him the knife and stuff like that. But I don't know, it looks like a scene out of Prince of Darkness or something. Like kind of almost Carpenter-esque a little bit. So that's nice. But that's about where I can leave this. So what I have to just say at the end is it's probably one of my, we'll say, least favorite horror movies. Because if I were to say one of the worst horror movies ever, horror is a genre that's had some very, very low lows. The highs are unbelievably high, but when a bad horror movie is bad, it can be some of the worst shit you've ever seen in your life. So I can't begin to call this one of the worst horror movies ever made. But like I said, of the ones that I've seen, it's one of my least favorite, I can say. So, and like I said, to say that about a Craven movie just feels so wrong. But I don't know. You'll notice it's like the only one that I don't own of the ones we've talked about this week. As far as like the rest of his movies, I think this and Swamp Thing and obviously The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, I think are the only Craven movies I don't own physically. So I think the Blu-ray for this might have a Craven commentary on it. So, like I said, I like to get my own opinions out before I kind of get anything definitive. So that's like as definitive as far as what intentions, where I like to see if I can figure things out for myself first. As you can see, I'm really struggling with this one. So, but I said the idea of purchasing this movie, I think it was like $15 on Amazon last time I looked it up, and that's a lot for a movie that I feel this way about. Like I said, I'll eventually, want to complete my physical Craven collection. So, at some point, I'll track it down, and maybe the man himself can talk me into it. But yeah, there's also a nice sort of end credits sequence where it's like the storyboards and like concept art and stuff like that. That's pretty cool too. But man, this movie's a struggle, and it always has been. But like I said, I'm not like mad at it, and I don't like hate it now. I'm just I want to understand it. you know? Like, I really want to get it, especially with Craven being proud of it. So, maybe one of these days it'll finally hit, but it's been out for... It has existed for 13 years, and that hasn't happened yet. So... But my emotions have changed. I went from angry and pissed to sad and confused. So, maybe we're onto something? Maybe? I don't know. But, yeah, that's how I feel about this, I guess. So, maybe somebody out there can convince me otherwise. Maybe it will reach that point sometime where it gets reevaluated and we can see it in a different way. I hope. And we can, like, just kind of give Craven that posthumous praise that he would have loved to have heard at the time would be fantastic. But as of right now, I still feel very far away from that, unfortunately. But we're not done with this week. We can still heap some praise on him, which is what we're going to do tomorrow. And like I said, there'll be an extra day, too, next week on Monday, so where we'll talk about something else that he did. So let's go ahead and move on to that. So until tomorrow, that's it.